everyone. Welcome to That Spooky. I'm Johnny.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is a weekly podcast that answers the burning question, what if Elvira were to host Forensic Files?
Yeah, we're kind of like spooky fusion.
Totally. We're like the bacon double cheeseburger sushi of podcasts.
Yeah.
So no Drag Race to talk about this week.
I know, right? What are we going to do?
Well, I guess we'll find a way to go on somehow, but don't worry because it'll be back in like a week.
Yeah, literally. The next episode, actually, I think like 2 days from when this episode lands on your podcast apps, Drag Race Season 11 is going to be premiering. No, the day before because it's on Thursday this year.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So get ready to welcome back your unofficial RuPaul's Drag Race recap
Segment.
which we never meant to become a thing, but it's become a thing.
It's become a thing, and we've got some queens that we are standing, and we just got chit-chat about them a little bit.
It's queer culture, and we love Evie Oddly, so you can't stop us from talking about it.
No, ma'am.
Cool. So I guess instead of Drag Race, we can talk about like another pop culture phenomenon that we experienced over the weekend.
Yes, honey. We went to see My Favorite Murder live. I really thought you were going to go into like the Friends theme song with that, and it was somewhere totally different.
Yeah, but instead I tried to give you like a Slash Goes Down to Georgia and plays the lap steel version of the theme song.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, so we saw My Favorite Murder at the Sony Center this past weekend.
Yes, bitch. It was pretty cool to be able to watch them do their thing live and in action.
It was so fucking crazy though, because I mean, like Tyler and I have been listening to podcasts for like years, and it was just so funny that like, you know, 5 years ago, this was something that you didn't even explain to people that you were listening to.
Yep.
They'd be like, oh, what are you listening to? And you're like, nothing, because you don't want to sit there and explain what the fuck a podcast is to them.
It's true.
Like, and I know a lot of people still don't listen to them, and you have to take like 20 minutes to explain to people how to access them in the first place. But a lot of people know what it is now, and it's kind of become like part of the zeitgeist in this really cool way. And it was just really awesome to see like a fucking podcast sell out a venue like the Sony Center 2 nights in a row, you know?
Yeah, right. Exactly. It was pretty wild. And we were there the second night because we tried to get tickets for the first night and we weren't even able to get a ticket.
Yeah.
It sold out in like seconds.
That was a thing. But it was a really fun show. I was so excited to be there.
It was a fun show, and I was shooketh to the core when Karen whipped out her topic, and it was the fucking Anthill Kids. I was like, bitch, I see you, I got you, I know you.
But not in like a territorial mean way.
No, just in like a whoa way.
I was about to say, I think that's a losing battle to try to square off with Karen Kilgariff.
Oh my God, I'd never.
Yeah, good fucking luck. And yeah, it was just really cool to be there because, I mean, like, they're one of my favorite podcasts to listen to. So it was just like, oh my God, like I saw the Beatles this weekend.
Right?
Yeah, so.
We saw the Beatles and they had pockets in their dresses.
Yes. And it was just cool because, I mean, it was also on the day that was like our 4-month anniversary of launching the show.
Yeah.
So it was just really cool to kind of see like one of the big inspirations for the show. I mean, like, let's call it what it is. Like, My Favorite Murder really inspired the vibe for this show. And I think the same could be said for like 5, 10, 30,000 other true crime comedy podcasts that have popped up over the last few years.
That's the tea.
Yeah, like we all owe My Favorite Murder more than we can ever explain.
Yeah.
But it was just so cool to see like two people who inspire us both so much and are just like fucking killing it, taking something that was like their creative project and just like watch them grow it into something that has just become bigger than us all. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, it was also cool because we was excited to be there. So we posted a little thing on Instagram. If you follow us on Instagram, you might have seen that we were already there in our story. And then we found out by doing that there was another spooky bitch in the audience there that night, and we got to meet Amanda after the show.
Yeah, it was so fucking cool. We ended up running into Amanda in the lobby after the show, and we got to have a little moment, have a little chat, and say hi. It was really cool.
Yeah, it was cute. So My Favorite Murder, bringing the folks together.
Imagine if somebody had come out and been like, excuse me, this meet and greet is a conflict of interest. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises.
Oh my God, right?
They send Steven after us.
Yeah.
We could take him. J.K. Miss thing, I can't even spell the word fight. So, Tyler, you have something to throw into spooky gay bullshit this week, don't you?
Girl, yes. So, as we do, we scour the internet looking for some fun, spooky stories to share with y'all every week. And I found one that was like pretty crazy. Okay, so there's this website called sewport.com, and that's so like SEWPORT, so like sewing. And it's basically an online platform to take designers and manufacturers and just kind of connect them. So a designer can go on and be like, hey, I have this idea. Is there anybody out there in the world that can make it a reality, right? And it goes vice versa. It's like, I'm a manufacturer. I can do this. And then designers will be like, perfect, let's talk. So it's just kind of this place to like bring people together. So there was this one woman who submitted a request to Sewport to have a purse made for her. So she posted onto the website. She even drew a little blueprint of what she wanted the purse to look like. But the thing was, she wanted the purse to be made out of her own skin.
What?
Yeah.
How do you enjoy that?
Right? So unfortunately, this woman, who is unnamed, but they call her Joan, has to go in for surgery to get her leg amputated for medical reasons.
Okay.
Yeah. So the idea to her of her leg just becoming this like medical waste kind of bothered her. So she was like, how can I keep my leg? Mm-hmm. So she came up with the idea to design a purse.
Why not?
So why not? So she submitted this design to Sewport, and I guess they have a bit of a screening process. And at first they were like, I don't know, but they decided to approve it. So if you know anybody that can make a purse out of human flesh, you can email Sewport at support@sewport.com and let them know. But also, interestingly enough, this woman came up with the idea to make a purse out of her own skin because she saw another ad on Sewport from a woman who wanted somebody to make a dress out of her dead mother's hair. Which, like, in the history of things, actually isn't that weird. Like, in Victorian times, they used to make shit out of dead people's hair all the time.
I was going to say that is very Victorian of her.
Right? So, I don't know. It seems like there's this renaissance of getting things made out of people's body parts in a ethical way, not an Ed Gein kind of way.
Wow. Okay. Well, here's a question. Is she offering the skin, like, pre-tanned? Like, is she treating it? Is she creating it into a fabric? Or is she like, hey, you're a fashion designer. I bet you could skin my leg pretty well. I'm going to send the whole thing over to you on a block of ice.
Yeah.
And why don't you just go to town on it and see if you can make it a Birkin?
Yeah, I think it's kind of that, actually.
Really?
Yeah, she doesn't really know how to do it, which is why she went to this website in the first place. She's like, I've got about $4,000 that I can contribute to this project. If it's not enough, we can talk. It's flexible. But how do we do this?
No.
Yeah.
I don't like that. It reminds me of when I used to work at a copy center and people used to come in and be like, hey, can I get this photocopied? And by the way, could you just Photoshop blah, blah, blah and blah, blah, blah onto this?
Yeah.
You know, just like crazy shit like that. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Sorry. So I guess no judgment if you want to make couture out of your own skin. But the deal is have some follow through.
Right.
Think about the steps beforehand.
Yeah. I guess she doesn't even know yet if she can actually even take the leg. So she's in talks with the hospital about getting her leg back after it's amputated. But I mean, it's her leg. I guess, like, if she wants it, she should be able to have it.
Yeah, but at the same time, if you're going to have hoop dreams like that, maybe aim for something a little bit more manageable. Like, try to do something with the bone.
Maybe. Yeah. Maybe that's the next plan. Maybe she wants the bag first and then she's going to save up to do something with the bone.
Yeah, I think a leg could create a lot of really great rainy day projects for you.
Right?
It could really help you amp up your DIY game.
Totally. Pinterest. I bet you there's tons of inspiration.
So no shade, make whatever garment you want, but ultimately, maybe it would be better just to learn how to do it yourself.
Maybe.
Don't worry about spending your money on having people do things with it. Take charge, save the money. Like, take that money and put it into a cool leg.
Yeah.
Don't fuck with what you don't need anymore. Move forward.
Well, I mean, I guess she has time to save up for a cool prosthetic, but, you know, rotting flesh is a bit time sensitive.
That's totally fair. That's actually the advice that my father got on his wedding day. Did you know that?
No.
So I guess we're on to oopsie poopsies.
Oopsie poopsie. We got one.
Yeah, we have one. It doesn't relate to the stories. It actually relates to the announcement of the Patreon last week. Hey. So last week was pretty busy. Patreon launched, mini episode came out, blah, blah, blah. So what had happened was when we had come up with the whole idea for the Patreon, we spitballed some prices. We ended up kind of going, sure. But then probably the day after we recorded the podcast last week, before we launched the Patreon, we sat down and we multiplied them all by 12 and we went, no, this doesn't feel right. Like the graded system looked good on paper, but then when we really broke down the math of it, we were like, no.
Yeah.
So ultimately we had changed it. And unfortunately, we left the old numbers in the podcast because we just had a lot on our plates. So we ended up getting 2 tier prices wrong. They were tier number 3 and number 4, so the higher end of the prices. So Smoky Goddess, which is tier number 3, we had said $25 on last week's episode. Baby, it's actually only $15 a month.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah. And then Big Devil Energy, which is the one that we were like, oh my God, this is just extra. We were originally going to do $50 a month, but we actually valued it at $35 a month. So that's what it is on the Patreon page. So thanks to everybody that's joined the Patreon so far. We've already got our first mini episode up there, and it's pretty cool. It actually puts it in your podcast feed, just like another podcast. So it has its own icon, that spooky mini episodes.
Yeah.
And like we said, we're going to be doing little bite-sized stories that wouldn't fit on the main show. And the first one that we put up is actually our personal spooky stories. So it's Tyler and I recounting every time in our lives that we've ever had a kind of paranormal encounter. So the real tea is there, baby.
She spilled. And next week, I guess, we'll be releasing another one. And then 2 weeks after that. And then 2 weeks after that.
Yeah, baby. So get ready. All right. Spooky gay bullshit done?
Check.
Okay, so I'm going first this week.
That is correct.
All right, well, for the last 3 weeks, I've ended up doing true crime accidentally. Oopsie.
Oopsie poopsie.
I don't really care. So this week I'm doing a haunting.
Ooh, yes. I love it when you do a haunting because you do it so well.
Oh, thank you. Just like twerking.
That's right.
So this is going to be the story of the Foster family, also known as the Demon Child haunting.
Ooh, bitch. I know a couple demon children in my life.
So this one might trigger you a little bit then.
Yeah.
So first thing I'm going to say right out the gate, their names are not actually the Fosters.
Oh? Yeah. Why?
Pseudonyms.
Okay, pseudonyms.
Exactly. So they only agreed to tell their story if they could have their anonymity. All tea, all shade. My big resource for information on this haunting is the show A Haunting.
Yeah, fave, girl.
I fucking love it.
Why not?
Now, I don't want this to become a thing because I've already done the Wyrick family haunting, which Unsolved Mysteries re-sparked my curiosity about, but ultimately it's also an episode of The Haunting, so I don't just want to be up here recounting episodes of a TV show that I love.
Right.
That's for Drag Race.
Right.
Yeah.
But hey, you know, inspiration strikes wherever it strikes.
I'm just stealing. I'm like, my favorite murder, here. I'm like, A Haunting, here. I'm like, I love your dress, thank you.
You're like a little magpie, like, ooh, shiny, I'll have that.
Thank you.
Shiny, I'll have that.
Thank you.
Ooh, another shiny thing, I'll have that.
You're not welcome. Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
So the Foster family were a family of 4 living in Kentucky. They only say Western Kentucky, and to make it even sweeter, they don't even fucking identify what year this is happening in.
Whoa.
But judging by the reenactments, we're gonna say the 90s.
Was there some moose in their hair?
Yeah, mostly in the bangs, you know?
Yeah.
Love that look.
That was my look.
Yeah, I had this moment where even though I had that lovely part down the middle that so many boys had in the 90s,
Yep.
one day I tried to be real cute and I tried to spike it all up in the front.
Oh, no, you did.
But the deal was, it was like 3 inches long, like the rest of my bowl-ass haircut.
Right.
So I essentially had a Spike from Degrassi moment.
Yes.
Yeah, and I looked pregnant, so it was a real good look.
It was cosplay.
Early cosplay, yeah, I was doing it.
Okay, so we assume that this happened in the 90s.
Yeah, because they want their privacy, but they also wanted that good TV money.
Mm-hmm.
So deal is, Jan Foster is the mother, Dale Foster Foster is the husband. Jan is a courier for what she says is a national delivery service in Western Kentucky. Drug running.
Oh, hey, yeah. That's why the anonymity.
Oh my God, yeah. Or like an underground makeup ring.
Yes.
Yeah, like black market Avon.
Yeah.
Love it. So Dale is also a U.S. Postal Service contractor. Oh my God, that's how they get the Avon into the country.
Shit. How close is Kentucky to like another border of another country?
Not that close, but he's running the mail in this anonymous little town. So these two ballers have two kids. So Cody Foster, he's the son, he's 5 years old. Then they also have Pamela, she's the daughter, she's 16. And like a good old teenager in what we imagine to be the 90s, she's not really there that much.
Right, she's at the mall.
Yeah, she's got moose to shoplift.
Yeah.
So both parents work full time and they have a nanny that stays home with Cody during the day because he's not old enough for school yet.
Right.
But she's not a live-in nanny, so she leaves when they come home from work.
Right.
And usually it's just like they come in, nanny leaves, see you bye, not a big deal. One day, the nanny sticks around. She's like, I really got to talk to you. So she pulls Jan aside just as Jan's getting home from work. And she's like, look, Cody has really been acting out today. So Cody's the 5-year-old, and the nanny is basically just like, he's using this really bad language. He was shouting a lot. And she was saying that she wouldn't even want to repeat what he was saying. Like, it was just really vile stuff, really kind of like out there for his age.
Right.
And Jan is like completely embarrassed, completely perplexed because she's like, we do not talk like that around this kid. And like Pamela's at the mall, so he's not learning it from her. So basically Jan is like, what the fuck? The nanny goes on to say, Cody was screaming, he was threatening her with like violence. And then to make it even better, the nanny is like, well, I took this little shithead out to the park. He's swinging on the swings, he's doing his thing. I'm sitting on the bench with my paper. I look down for a second, look back up, and suddenly he's not there on the swings.
Oh shit.
And she was kind of freaked out for a second and then just kind of like starts to look around and sees him about like 20 feet away from the swings, completely wrapped in playing with like his trucks and all this kind of stuff. So like he was just in a completely different area, almost like he had teleported. And she was like, this is really freaky. And don't worry, it gets totally worse because the nanny is sitting there, sees him over there playing with the truck, and notices that he's having a full ass conversation with nobody.
Nope.
Yeah, and it's not just like a little bit of baby babbling. Like this 5-year-old kid is sitting there fully like talking and responding to another person.
And that person's not there.
Yeah, here's the thing though. You and I know this is a haunting, so let's roll the heat back off this.
Yeah.
The nanny is just kind of like, this is weird. He probably has an imaginary friend, but she wants to make the mother aware of this because she had been his nanny for a while and had never noticed anything like that.
Right. So weird behavior will shift.
Especially when it pops up on the same day that he decides to threaten you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, like, real talk, what the fuck can a 5-year-old do to you?
Right?
It's like, threaten away. I can take you. So the nanny leaves, and Jan just swears up and down that she'll talk to Cody, she'll correct the behavior, everything will be great. And that's kind of that. So, I mean, she talks to Cody about the language, he doesn't really say anything back to her. And then that night, when she's tucking Cody into bed, she decides to ask, hey, dude, who's your new friend that you were talking to at the park?
Oh, clever girl.
Yeah, because she's interested. She wants to know if her son has an imaginary friend. So she's like, yeah, you know, who's this person? And he's like, oh, his name's Man.
Ooh.
Yeah, what a fucking inventive name, kid.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and Jan completely agrees. So she's like, are you sure it's just Man? Is it not like John or George or something? And he's adamant. He's like, no, it's Man.
Maybe it's Manny. Manfred.
No, he's pretty straight up. It's just Man. So she doesn't press any further. She's like, oh, it's my kid being a kid. Whatever. Kids are dumb. And she just kind of explains it away because there aren't a lot of other kids in the area. He doesn't have anyone else to hang out with. He's a bit of a lone wolf as it is. So it makes sense that her son has an imaginary friend.
Sure.
But then all of a sudden, some weird stuff starts to pile up around the house. So all of a sudden, Cody starts to tell her in the mornings that he would be laying in bed and the closet door door would start to open. Yeah, and then one night, Jan is walking down the hall and hears a kid laughing. And she thinks it's Cody, but it doesn't really sound like Cody, you know what I mean? Like a mother knows her son's voice. Yeah, so she just like yells for him to go to bed, and it stops, and she goes about her ways. And then one night, Jan's woken up by her daughter Pamela. So Pamela is standing at the foot of Jan's bed, and she's like, "Hey mom, how are you doing in the middle of the night? I was laying in bed and I heard the creaking of footsteps in my room, and it sounded like they were coming from under the bed." Now the deal was Pamela had looked under the bed, saw the cat under there, so she just tried to explain it away as that.
Right.
She gets the cat, brings it into bed with her, goes back to sleep. Wakes up a little while later with the cat in bed with her, and the creaking is still going on around the room. Suddenly it sounds like there's scratching going up and down the walls, and the door starts jostling. So Pamela's standing there, there's the scratching going on, there's the door moving. After a little bit of time, it all starts to die down. As soon as she feels safe, she books it to her fucking parents' room, wakes her mother up, tells her about all of this, and ends up having to stay the night in her parents' bed.
And Pamela is not the kind of a girl that would want to do that.
Yeah, any good 16-year-old would be like, "Fuck you, mom and dad," but she's like scared beyond wits.
Right.
So the next morning, Jan, the mother, wakes up before everybody else. She drags herself out of bed, super tired, leaves everybody sleeping, goes for a shower. She's doing her thing in the shower when all of a sudden she hears a little bang out in the bathroom beyond the shower curtain. So she peeps out, doesn't see anything. Closes the shower curtain back up, goes back to cleaning herself. She's showering away, and then all of a sudden, she sees a dark silhouette walk past the shower curtain.
No, ma'am.
So Jan, thinking that it might be Cody, calls out to see if it's him. Doesn't hear a response. Looks out, sees nothing. Looks down at the bath mat, sees a black footprint on the bath mat.
Whoa.
Yeah, like a dirty black footprint.
No.
So she turns off the shower, dries off, gets her robe on, goes down to Cody's room. Wants to see if it was him. And when she gets down there, he's just playing. He's doing his thing. And according to Jan, he was keeping like a full conversation. So he was like, "Oh, do you want to play, man? Oh, you don't want to do that? Well, how about this? Okay, well, let's do that." Like all of that kind of shit.
Right.
He was responding to somebody that wasn't there. And she asked him who he was playing with. He's like, "Man,
No big deal.
yeah, it's kind of like a paranormal big brothers and big sisters thing, you know?"
Totally, yeah.
Yeah, innocent enough if you're a Mr. Gordy.
Sure, yeah, it is kind of very that.
Yeah, so I'm not unoriginal. A haunting, you're unoriginal. So she tells him playtime's over and that he has to come get dressed for the day. He really doesn't like this. He gets up and just kind of like shit glares his mom for a little while.
Yeah.
And then just screams, "I don't want to," and then takes his clothes and like throws them off the bed.
Damn, like, kid, you have nothing to do. Put on your fucking clothes.
You have nothing to do, and somebody laid out your fucking clothes for you, you little asshole. You didn't even have to think about how you look that day.
Right?
So Jan's like, maybe I'll tell my husband about this. So goes down to the kitchen and is like, "Hey, remember our crazy kid? He's doing all this shit." Looks over her shoulder. Cody has followed her down to the kitchen, and he's dressed, but then he starts screaming that he doesn't want to eat breakfast. He just wants to play with man.
Right.
Yeah, so he basically came out to say, like, "I'll meet you halfway, I'll wear these clothes, but fuck you." So he starts getting really agitated and just starts flailing, and then his father tries to get him to sit down, and the kid tries to fight his fucking father.
Damn, why are you fighting?
Yeah, like, what do you want him to do? Chew the fucking food for you, you ungrateful little shit? So, moving on. One night, Jan and Dale decide that they need more info about man. So they decide to approach Cody with total kid gloves because their 5-year-old's a raving lunatic.
Yeah.
And they ask him how old man is. Cody says 6.
Well, I remember being 5 and 6 in real old, so sure.
Yeah, imagine a 6-year-old named Man.
I still think it's like an abbreviation, like, you know, how like Sam for Samantha. I think it's like a man for Manny.
I don't know. I really love to imagine that it's just a 6-year-old kid named Man.
Maybe their mom, when they gave birth to them, was just like really on the good meds, and it's like, "What's your baby's name?" She's like, "Man."
She's like, "I'm naming him after his father. It's a party."
Or, you know, it's just like another win for toxic masculinity. I'm going to name my child man because he's going to be a man.
Yeah, or I want my child to start smoking cigarettes as young as humanly possible.
Yeah.
So the parents are like, oh, an invisible 6-year-old named Man. Why don't you tell us more? And Cody's like, sure. Well, Man has brown hair. He has pale skin. They're like, well, where does Man come from? And Cody's like, oh, well, you know, from behind the park where the lake is, deep in the ground.
Shit.
Totally casual stuff, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no chill. And then they ask Cody if something happened to Man. And Cody says that a stranger took Man from his mom and then did terrible things to him. And then Man was left there and he was crying and he screamed out for his mom, but his mom didn't come find him. And then he never saw her again. And the parents are just like, oh, wow, this is coming from a 5-year-old. What a treat.
Right? Really elaborate for a 5-year-old.
So then Jan and Dale are sitting there being like, okay, what the fuck? How do we navigate this situation? One of them asks Cody if Man is dead, and Cody is just like, yep,
Straight up.
that's what it is, mama.
Speaking of children that pull out elaborate storylines out of seemingly nowhere, this reminds me of the story that I supposedly used to tell when I was like 2 years old. So if I was in a fit or something like that, I would say to my mom or I'd say to my dad, I wish that I still lived with my real family. And they would humor me and they would be like, oh, who was your real family? And I would be like, I had 7 brothers, no sisters. We lived in a big castle and there were skeletons in the basement chained to chains, and then there was a fire, and then after the fire I had to come and live with you. And they were like, oh, okay, so did your family, like, did they die in the fire? And I was like, no, they didn't die in the fire. They died when the man came through the window and shot them all. And I told this story multiple times as a 2-year-old. So like, I don't know, maybe I had like a past life or something.
Or maybe you were just the most extra little kid ever, because that is just like 3 steps above being like, well, I'm adopted.
Right.
I bet you're not really my mom and dad.
Right? But like, where would I get this story from?
Really, at 2 years old, though?
Yeah, I don't remember telling this story. I only know I did because my parents tell me that I did. Like, I don't remember, but kind of interesting, kind of weird. So anyway, no, this kid's just elaborate story kind of made me think of that.
Well, once a spooky bitch, always a spooky bitch.
Yes, God.
So back to the parents, they take all this in. Basically, Jan, the mother, is super scared. Dale, the father, not so much. He's a bit of a non-believer.
Classic.
Yeah, and he basically just thought that Cody was repeating something that he had heard somewhere else and that he was just like going through a phase of being rebellious.
Right.
Which, I mean, is the thing with kids. Like, one of my sister's first words was fuck. So, like, let's not put it past a little kid to parrot a swear word.
Totally.
Jan doesn't think that this is what it is. She's like, this kid is going into way too much detail about Man. This ghost is getting way too comfortable with my son. So Jan decides to arm herself with knowledge, goes to the library, tries to find out some information on the microfiche. Yeah, my favorite. So she checks the newspapers to see if there are any reports of child murders within the last 30 to 40 years. Sounds like a good time.
Yep.
Finds nothing.
Okay.
But even though nothing comes up, Jan is still pretty committed to this idea that her son Cody is telling her the truth. She's like, I'm sure he's seeing somebody, and he says it's a little boy, but at this point she starts to get a little bit of doubt about whether or not Man is a 6-year-old boy, like he's presenting himself to her son.
Right. So it seems like she's got some knowledge on what ghosts do, and it's being a little bit of a tricky dicky and just showing the kid something that the kid can relate to, like another little boy.
I guess so. So anyway, back to home life, Cody is disengaging even more. He doesn't want to be read stories. He doesn't want to play. Man has basically become his whole world. He just wants to hang out with this imaginary friend. And Jan is really starting to resent the whole situation. It's gone from like obnoxious to like, okay, kind of charming to kind of spooky to just a piss off at this point.
Yeah.
And Cody is changing for the worst at an alarming speed. Now at this point, Jan really feels like she's running out of options. She's like, I can't research this. I can't really suss it out on my own. I need to call him back up. So what is the most cliche thing you can do at this time?
Call a priest.
No, call a shaman.
Okay, work.
Yeah. So Jan decides to call up her old friend, a shaman that lives in Kentucky. And even though her husband Dale is super skeptical, he goes along with it because he can clearly see how upset his wife is about all this stuff.
Right.
So a local indigenous medicine man comes to the house to assess the situation. Now, I wish that I could say what tribe he belonged to. I wish I could say what his exact role was. I wish I could say his name. But unfortunately, these people just say the Native American shaman came over. So the whitewashing is real. So Jan explains to this man everything that's going on with Cody. Explains his anger, the distancing, the language, and his friend named Man. And her friend the shaman basically is like, well, it could be your son that invited the spirit into the house. So the only way to remove the spirit is to uninvite that spirit.
Right.
Tells her to burn sage and sweetgrass around the four corners of the property, wafted with a feather, all that good stuff. Then he tells her to anoint all of the entryways to the house, so like the doors, the windows, everything like that, with olive oil. And then while doing that, pray for Cody. So she thanks him, he goes along on his way. So the next morning, once everyone goes away for the day, Jan is home alone. She gets to saging. And she is holding out so much hope because basically she's saying, if this doesn't work, I don't know what the fuck to do.
Yep.
Well, get ready not to know what the fuck to do. So the ritual finishes. Jan notices that things start to take a turn for the better. They always do. Cody starts to kind of go back to normal. Not completely, but he's pretty much there, she says.
Right.
According to Jan, everything seems good for about 3 months. Until one day, Jan is at home folding laundry. Cody is in the hallway of the house playing with his trucks. So Jan's doing her thing. Cody seems basically normal again, so she's left him to his own devices. All of a sudden, she starts to hear from the other room Cody having a conversation and responding and getting back to the same old song and dance that he used to do when Man was around 3 months ago.
Right. Man is back.
So she's paralyzed with fear, and she listens to him having this conversation for a while. All of a sudden, he goes quiet. She musters up the courage to go out into the hallway and see what's going on. She sees him just sitting there, staring into a corner.
Right.
He's frozen. She calls out to him. He doesn't respond. She runs over. He's sitting there, clutching a photograph that she doesn't even recognize. So she tries to grab it, and he starts freaking out. Once she finally calms him down, she takes a look at the photo that's in his hand. And it's this old Polaroid, and it's really worn out. And it kind of looks like it's from the 50s or the 60s. And it's this old woman sitting in a chair with a little boy sitting on the floor to the right of her. Jan asks Cody who's in the picture. Cody says that's Man.
Weird.
Jan asks how he got it. Cody says that Man gave it to him.
No.
Jan is terrified. Now, I'm not sure what happened to the photo after that, but a few days later, Cody is getting lunch served to him by his nanny. Jan is in the other room and all of a sudden hears a plate breaking. She runs into the kitchen and he's yelling about how he doesn't want his lunch. Jan is pissed. She gives Cody a timeout. He pushes her and then says that he doesn't have to listen to her anymore and runs away. Jan's like, all right, well, fair enough. And the nanny's like, fuck this shit. I am so out. The nanny quits right then and there.
Whoa, nanny.
She's like, yeah, you know what? Your little asshole kid threatening me, throwing dishes. I don't have to do this.
So she packed up her things and she went back to Flushing.
Yeah, back to sell makeup door to door. So Jan is just desperately trying to keep it together at this point, and she is really the one who's been experiencing most of Cody's shit. So she's like, cool, I'm strong, I can take it. She just tries to cover it up and rationalize it as much as possible in hopes that it would go away. The family's just kind of like, well, Cody's just acting like an asshole, and Jan's like, oh yeah, totally, it's just his mood, I'm sure. Yeah, okay, it's not a demon. And Cody just starts to take a further downward turn. He stops talking to everybody in the family. This 5-year-old is just boss bitching around, icing people out. Jan says that he had no love for anybody. He wasn't hugging anybody anymore. He didn't kiss his parents goodnight anymore. He was almost like a stranger to them.
Right. Right.
So because the nanny had quit, though, Jan had to come up with another idea for childcare for Cody while she was away at work. So basically, she ends up reaching out to a distant cousin named Tammy. Tammy has a little girl named Kaylee who's about Cody's age, so they can hang out together. And basically, she's like, hey, can Cody stay at your place while I'm at work? She agrees to it, and she's like, yes. So it's day one at Cousin Tammy's place. Jan is driving Cody over to Tammy's house to be babysat. On the way there, she turns to Cody. She's like, look, please leave man behind. Leave him at home today. He doesn't need to come out to play. So Cody is basically like, cool, but no promises.
Right.
So Jan drops him off there. Everything seems to be fine. She's at work. Suddenly, a few hours into the workday, she gets a call. They say it's urgent. She gets to the phone, and it's her distant cousin, Tammy. Tammy is hysterically crying and screaming. She can barely make out what she's saying, but from what Jan can tell, she's just repeating, just come and get him now. I can't take care of Cody anymore.
Damn.
So Jan hangs up, rushes right over. She's greeted in the front yard by Tammy being like, what the fuck is wrong with your kid? Little Kaylee, terrified.
Damn, Cody did some shit.
Yeah, so Tammy goes on to tell Jan that everything was going fine. Cody was just playing, doing her thing. Tammy's doing some housework. She's in another room. Suddenly, she hears a really super deep voice coming from the room that the kids are playing in. It sounds like a man's voice. And at first, she's like, oh, maybe Cody's dropping his voice. Maybe he's doing a bit. But then upon further listening, she's like, no, this is way too deep to be this 5-year-old.
Right.
So then all of a sudden, she hears Kaylee screaming and calling out for her. She runs to the room, opens up the door. Her daughter, Kaylee, is standing there in the middle of the room, frozen in fear. Cody is just a few feet behind her, mean mugging the shit out of her, just like staring her down. And there are toys surrounding Kaylee, levitating in the air.
Shit.
Yeah, like all the toys that were on the ground in the room that they were playing with were suddenly levitating at head height and then drop to the ground. Kaylee runs over and is just like, I don't want to play with him anymore. I don't want anything to do with her. Tammy is scared shitless. That's when she calls Jan, and basically she's just like, look, you're cool, your kid's not. Kaylee doesn't want to play with Cody anymore. Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah, fair enough. Nothing floated in my house before until yo kid came in.
Yeah, Tammy's like, that's your demon to work with. So Jan takes Cody back home. When they get to the house, she's like, so, why did you take man to Cousin Tammy's house? Cody says nothing, continues to ice her out. So at this point, Jan is stuck with nobody to take care of Cody, and she can't take the time off work to take care of him, so she ends up having to find a local daycare. She calls to see if they have openings. They say they do. She's like, hey, can you take him tomorrow? They say sure, and Jan is just like, okay, well, that's done with.
Right.
She goes up to Cody. She's like, look, okay, tomorrow you're starting daycare. It's going to be cool. I swear to God, you're going to meet a lot of kids. Please, for the love of God, whatever the fuck you do not take man with you.
Right.
Cody promises. So with a good old pinky swear, he ends up going off to daycare the next day, and he keeps his promise. There's nothing weird that happens, but as soon as he comes home, he's right back in the arms of man. Ooh, that doesn't sound right.
Not the greatest.
Nothing about the story sounds right. So you'd think, hey, Cody can start to control this a little bit. Maybe things are getting better. Nuh-uh, honey. Cody starts destroying his toys. So one day his father comes into Cody's room to tell him to come to supper, and he finds Cody sitting there on the floor, massacring his teddy bear with a pair of scissors.
Wow. No.
And his dad is like, oh, hey, Cody, why are you doing what you're doing? And Cody is just like, well, man told me I should do it.
Right.
He said it would be fun. Find fun somewhere else.
Right. Like, teach the child how to knit. Teach the child how to play rummy.
Yeah, like learn about different wines, just like find a hobby.
Yeah, 5-year-old alcoholic. Why not?
You know what? I would rather take a 5-year-old with a taste for Pinot than a 5-year-old who's in touch with demonic entities.
I mean, you're not wrong.
So basically the dad's like, well, I see Jan's point. This kid's fucked up. Then things just get better. So one day when Pamela's home, she's just like, God, where the fuck's my cat?
Oh no.
Don't worry.
Okay, good.
I know, I was in the same headspace when they started talking about this. But basically she's like, where the hell's my cat? All of a sudden they find the cat. He's underneath the couch cushions, and dumbass little Cody is sitting on the fucking cat.
What the fuck?
Yeah, and the parents are like, oh, do tell why you're doing that. And he's just like, oh, man said it would be fun. Yeah, man says a lot of things would be fun, doesn't he? So the parents are just like, what the fuck? Our son is now trying to kill the family cat. Fast forward a few days later, one day Jan's cleaning Cody's room, and she goes into his closet, and she's like, oh, wow, everything in here seems a little bit damp. I wonder what it could be. Oh my God, he peed all inside his closet.
Ew.
He peed inside his toy box. He peed in just about everywhere that he could fucking hide pee in that room, mama.
What the hell?
Yeah, so his clothes are soaked, his toys are soaked, everything's soaked.
He's
and when she
pissed everywhere.
Yeah, and when she asks him about it, he's just like, man said it would be okay.
What the hell?
Yeah, and like, what a fucking response. It's like, not even man said it would be fun. It's just like, well, man said that the outcome would be okay.
I'm just going to start doing that. I'm going to start having an entity named Man that's following me around, and I'm just going to be a total asshole. I'm going to piss everywhere. When somebody calls me out on it, I'm just going to be like, well, man said it would be okay.
You see how long you can do that without me leaving you. I double dog dare you.
Okay.
So basically, she's like, well, I don't care what man said. That shit's not okay. And he's just like, well, man said that I don't have to listen to you anymore.
Oh my God.
And like all caps, he fucking screams this at her. Then he tries to attack his mother again.
Can you imagine just being in like a parental war with the demonic spirit? Just being like, I don't care if the entity said you can do it, you cannot.
And this is one of those situations where you're like, this 5-year-old is really trying to fight me right now.
Yeah.
And like, then you're put in a position where you're like, I know I can take this fucking 5-year-old, but I can't actually do anything of note to defend myself because he's a weak ass little 5-year-old.
And like, who wants to fight a 5-year-old?
Especially one that you made. That's a little thing called child abuse. Thank you very much. So she overpowers him. He scoots away. Jan is just like, great, my freaky ass little kid is just taking a further downward turn at a more alarming rate than ever. Fast forward a few nights later, Jan is sleeping. She wakes up to Cody in her room. This time, he's scared. He is freaking out and he's like, Mom, my bed was shaking. I need you.
Oh,
yeah.
Cody.
And this is the thing. So Jan says that in that moment, she finally saw her old son for the first time in a year.
Oh.
She took him in. She comforted him as much as possible. And at this point, it was finally clear to her that this entity, man, was not something that was possessing her kid. This was not something coming from within her kid. This was something that was attacking her family, but focusing in on her 5-year-old son.
Right. The most probably influential of them all.
Exactly. So she's laying there with him. She comforts him for a while. He ends up falling asleep. Jan doesn't, though. And when the coast is clear, she gets up and walks down to his bedroom.
Oh, shit.
So this is the middle of the night. She goes in, it's pitch black, and she decides to lay down in her son's bed. She's like, whatever this thing is, it can come fuck with me.
Right.
So she's laying there, hoping for man to possibly appear. Suddenly, it starts to get cold. She closes her eyes, and after some time, she opens them, and she sees the silhouette of a little boy standing in the doorway. Now, the whole room at this point is just kind of barely lit by moonlight, so she can barely see it. She thinks it's Cody. So she calls out for him, and he starts to come over to her. She takes him in her arms, but realizes this isn't her son. All of a sudden, this little boy starts to grow, and it grows and it grows, and it suddenly becomes this large entity, like 6-8 feet tall.
Ooh.
And it's got gray skin and fucked up teeth, and it just starts to laugh at her. And she can barely get a full sense of it, but it's just got this demonic laughing. And she's awake at this point. She's not dreaming this. So she realizes this is man. And what she's looking at right now and holding in her fucking arms is man in his full form. And whatever the fuck this is, that again is in her fucking arms right now, has been masquerading around as a 6-year-old boy. So in the time that it takes for her to clock this, he's grown to his full form. Suddenly, this isn't a hug anymore, baby. This shit's a struggle. So they start going back and forth. Finally, she's able to overpower and get away from him. She starts screaming, and the family runs in, turns on the lights. Whatever it was, gone. She's just sitting there on the bed crying. And the family doesn't know what the fuck to do.
Yeah.
They don't know how to comfort her. They don't know where to go from here. So Jan, being the badass that she is, pulls her shit together and then starts comforting her fucking family.
Yes, mama.
Because basically she's like, I made it out alive. You guys just need to chill the fuck out. I swear it's nothing. It's nothing big. Whatever. Just move on. She ends up convincing everyone to go back to bed. And Jan isn't able to sleep. So once everyone is back down, she gets back up and just starts walking through the home, praying for some sort of guidance. And in this moment, she's going over the possibility of moving or something like that. But ultimately, she realizes that she can't move away from this because, as demonstrated before, man will follow Cody wherever he goes.
Right.
So she's at a loss. She goes back to bed. The next day, she has off from work. Everyone goes off to work, school, daycare. Jan is home alone. She decides to set a plan in motion. So she calls her old friend, the nondescript shaman, again. And she says that she doesn't know what the fuck this is, but she just needs it out. She's basically like, it's more than we thought it was. It's not a little boy. It's something demonic. And her friend is basically just like, oh, cool. Say no more. I totally get it. Basically, the first time we were there, we were trying to get a little boy spirit out. What you need to do is repeat the ritual, but this time be specific. So you have to focus your energy and all that on getting rid of this evil spirit instead of just saying, get this little boy out of our house.
Right.
So Jan's kind of like, okay, thanks for the advice, I guess. I don't think I can do this alone. And he's basically just like, sorry, girl, you're the only one that can do it. This is your house. This is your demon. This is your fucking problem. You need to be the one to get this out of this house.
Right.
So he's like, get some sage, get some sweetgrass, buy a bottle of olive oil, and you better work, bitch.
Work. Dish.
Exactly. So she gets off the phone, gathers her things, and starts to do the blessing again in the house. Only this time, she calls it by name. She says, man, get out of the house. And she says that during this cleansing, she really started to feel brave and a lot more confident. Mm-hmm. So she started outside, on the corners of the property. She sages all of that. She does her whole thing. She starts to feel a bit of a sense of peace. She goes back inside, and as soon as she goes inside the door to start saging in there, she starts to feel the temperature drop.
Right.
It feels unnaturally cold. And she says that she can feel a presence around her. It was this kind of like overwhelming feeling that you were being watched, which was kind of a thing that they would experience every now and then with man in the house, but this was like super intensified. And she could almost feel something following her throughout the house.
Right.
So regardless of this kind of like resistant force, she continues on. She does the cleansing throughout her home. And she's calling out for this demonic entity to go back from where it came, all that good stuff. And regardless of this like entity kind of rushing around her, she's able to complete the cleansing. Once it's done, she says that she finally felt a sense of peace. She says that she could feel that whatever man was, it was finally out of her home. And it was almost like reality snapped back on. That day, Cody comes back from daycare and he's all smiles. He brings her a piece of art that he had drawn and he's being all proud of it, and it felt good.
Yay, Cody, showing off your art.
Yeah, baby Picasso. And then basically in the time following that, Jan said that everything basically just fell back to feeling normal. From time to time, they would still hear noises throughout the house. Sometimes they would hear creaks. Sometimes they would wake up in the middle of the night and hear something but not see anything. Now, man doesn't pop back up again, but they still get the feeling that they're being watched from time to time. So while nothing horrible's happening and while Cody's back to normal, Jan still worries that from time to time, man might be trying to come back into their lives. So while this has been taken care of, they're still hypervigilant because the activity has subsided quite a bit, but it hasn't fully stopped.
Right.
And that's the story of the quote-unquote Foster family of Kentucky, also known as the Demon Child haunting.
Wow. I wonder if Cody is maybe some sort of sensitive and is attracting spirits to the home. Maybe this is something he'll have to deal with or has had to deal with his entire life.
I don't know, and the mystery deepens because, like I said, they completely went anonymous with this. Mm-hmm. That was the term in which they agreed to tell their story. So unless Cody comes forward in years to come and speaks more about it, I don't think we'll be able to find out more about this. So we shall see.
Well, girls, we shall see. So once again, men, are trash.
Yeah, man is trash. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's all I have. Your turn?
My turn. So it's been a few weeks since I've done anything true crime related, so I thought I'd dip my toes back in the true crime waters for a little bit.
Love it.
Yeah. So today I'm going to be talking about the Parker-Hulme murder.
Ooh, I don't know her.
You don't know her? Well, she is one of the most infamous, if not the most infamous murders in New Zealand history.
Oh shit, girl, we're going on vacation.
Yes, we are going on vacation to New Zealand for a story of obsession and murder.
Sounds amazingly corny. I can't wait.
Get ready. So our story starts with Pauline Parker. So Pauline Parker was born May 26, 1938 in Christchurch, New Zealand, to her working class mother and father, Honora Parker and Herbert Raper, whom were together but never married.
That's cool. Love can take many forms.
That's right, but still kind of not totally kosher in 1938, but whatever. At age 5, Pauline was diagnosed with osteomyelitis, which is an infection of the bone. So I guess specifically it affects the bone marrow, but basically it can cause a great deal of pain in specific bones and has other symptoms like red, itchy skin, fever, and weakness. So she was diagnosed with this at age 5. So this diagnosis basically meant that Pauline would often spend much of her time in bed alone and away from other children. So naturally, she found other ways to pass the time. So she took to art, reading, and writing as a way to escape the dreariness of her reality during those bedridden days.
Kind of like a Citizen Kane story.
Yes, exactly.
Love it.
But now, moving on, we have Juliette Hulme. So Juliette's childhood was not that much unlike Pauline's childhood. So Juliette Hulme was born in Blackheath, London, England on October 28th, 1938. So Juliette was the daughter of physicist Dr. Henry Ransford Hulme, and I actually couldn't find out the name of her mother. So there we go. As a child, Juliette was diagnosed with tuberculosis. So just like Pauline, she spent much of her childhood in isolation. However, having the financial means to do so, Juliette's parents sent her to the Caribbean and South Africa to live with family in hopes that a warmer climate would help to improve her health.
Yeah, they're like, fuck the sanatorium, let's go on vacation.
Right? Actually, they didn't go on vacation. They were just like, bye, girl.
Yeah.
And shipped her off. They didn't go with her.
Fair enough. And wasn't Hume like a really popular scientist? I feel like I've heard that name before.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I know nothing about science.
You'll have to look her up.
Not in my household.
Okay, so fighting an infectious disease and being so far away from her family, and for so many years, one can imagine that maybe Juliette may have felt quite lonely and isolated, maybe a little bit abandoned.
Yeah, totally. Just being shipped off to another continent.
Yeah.
Nothing big.
No, not at all. So like Pauline, Juliette developed a love for reading and writing in her adolescence.
Nerd.
Yeah. So when her father, Henry Hulme, was appointed rector at the University of Canterbury, the family all left England, and I think she had a younger brother. So her parents and younger brother all left England and moved to Christchurch, New Zealand. And because it was pretty warm in New Zealand, Juliette was able to grace them with her presence at the age of 13.
Wow, just around the time that you would finally start to appreciate your independence, your family's just like, nope, you're coming back.
That's the tea. So this puts us at about 1951. So Pauline was a few months older than Juliette, but they were in the same year and attended the same school together and were in the same class. So when Pauline and Juliette met in school, they became pretty close right away because they realized that they had both experienced childhood illnesses.
They're like, oh, you lived in an iron lung for a few years too?
Yeah, me too.
Oh my God, were you also abandoned by your family?
Yes, emotionally.
Yes, me too. cute.
So they had these things in common, and then they realized they had other things in common. They both loved literature. They both loved art. They both loved poetry. So they became inseparable pretty much immediately. So the two girls pretty much spent all of their spare time hanging out together, and they would really work off of each other's imaginations. And they soon created a considerable fantasy world that they began to refer to as the fourth world. They fuel their fantasies with their own gods, religions, and laws, and they would spend hours creating stories, and they actually renamed themselves Gina and Deborah.
What?
Yeah.
So their spiritual names were Gina and Deborah?
Yeah.
That is so fierce.
Right? You could have any name in the spirit world, in the fourth world that you could ever imagine, and I'm going to be Gina.
I'm going to be Deborah. I love that. What would your spiritual world name be?
I feel like my spiritual world name would be...
Make it real mundane.
I know, right? It has to be. I guess maybe my spiritual world name would be Alexander, because that was supposed to be my actual name until my mom realized everybody would mispronounce it Alec, and she didn't like that very much, so she named me Tyler.
She was like, not like a Baldwin in my house.
Right? And as a Buffy fan growing up, I was like, I could have been Xander, and instead I'm Tyler. Felt duped. So yeah, definitely Alexander.
Cool. I'd be Candi.
Candi?
Love it.
With a Y or with an I?
With an I.
Ooh,
of course.
Of course.
It'd be Candy Can.
Okay.
Do you love that?
I love it.
I do
Candy
too.
Can. Okay, so outside in the real world, Pauline and Juliet also shared their plans for a life of fame and fortune as actresses in America.
And that's how Debbie Reynolds came to Hollywood.
That's it. You know her.
And Gina Gershon.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Deborah quickly became Debbie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, because these girls had found friendship in each other, both families were actually kind of excited that their daughters had found friendships because, again, they weren't able to do a lot of the normal kid things that other kids were able to do. They couldn't really participate in sports. They couldn't really do this. They couldn't really do that.
And they're probably also really stoked that their daughter is considering moving to another continent. They're like, score, that bitch is going to leave New Zealand too.
Well, not exactly, because actually, as they grew closer and closer, the families actually started to get a little bit concerned. So Pauline was kind of beginning to lose interest in school, and her parents were afraid that her grades were about to decline as she was spending a lot of time with Juliet. And Juliet rode horses, and Pauline really wanted to ride horses. I think Pauline actually had a secret horse hidden somewhere in a stable. So Pauline was just kind of like, I'm going to do what I want kind of attitude.
She had a double life with a horse?
She had a double life with a horse, and when her parents eventually found out, they were just like, well, I guess you can keep the horse.
They're like, some kids go to school and put on makeup when they get there and then take it off when they get home. I guess our daughter's just harboring a horse. That's
Exactly,
it.
right? So this was Pauline. And then on Juliet's side, Juliet's family began to worry because Juliet began to isolate herself from them completely and spent all of her alone time writing letters to Pauline. But also, like, don't send your child to another country for years and years and years and expect them to maybe, you know, not resent that a little bit.
And it also kind of sounds like they may have had feelings for each other.
Well, this is the tea, and that was also a part of the problem because Pauline's mother, Mrs. Parker, actually kind of suspected that maybe there were some romantic feelings happening between Pauline and Juliet. And at the time, that was no. Especially not in Christchurch, New Zealand.
Yeah, not in the 50s. That would just be an abomination.
Exactly. It was like considered a mental illness. So, of course, they did not want their daughters to be lesbians, which is total BS, by the way.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so Pauline and Juliet's main objective in life was basically just to be together. They spent many nights together, they bathed together, and they shared many intimate secrets with one another. So as their parents began to grow weary of the obsessive nature of their friendship, Pauline and Juliet also began to fear that their families were trying to break them apart. And in fact, when Juliet was once again hospitalized with tuberculosis, the family saw it as the perfect opportunity for the girls to spend some time apart. Like, oh, thank God our daughter has tuberculosis again.
They were like, well, if there could ever be a good time for tuberculosis, I guess that was it.
That would be it. And during the time that Juliet was in the hospital, treating her tuberculosis, Pauline's parents, concerned about their own daughter, decided to take her to see a psychiatrist who informed them that he suspected that the pair were having a homosexual relationship. And again, this was something that he deemed to be a mental illness. So equipped with this information, the families really were hoping that their daughters would be able to find independence away from each other. However, their friendship resumed with the same intensity once Juliet was discharged from the hospital.
Yeah, and if these kids can be wrangling secret horses, I'm sure they can manage a secret friendship.
Right, exactly. Secret friendship horses, actually.
Love it. One says best, the other one says friends.
Can you imagine they're just airbrushed best friends on the ass of the horses? I love it. So it was around this time that Pauline was dealing with her psychiatrist, thinking that she was gay AF, and Juliet was dealing with her tuberculosis.
She's just over here being tuberculicious.
Yeah, definitely. So it was around this time that they found out that Juliet's mother was having an affair with the family lodger, Walter Perry. And like, why do I know Walter Perry's name and why don't I know her mother's name?
How loud am I allowed to yell the word misogyny right now?
It's kind of late, so not super loud, but a little bit loud.
Okay, we can move forward.
Okay. So when the affair was found out and Juliet's mother decided to stay with Perry, Juliet's parents decided to get a divorce. So early on in 1954, in the aftermath of the separation, the Humes decided that Juliet would be leaving New Zealand when Dr. Hume resigned from his position as the rector of Canterbury University College and decided that he himself would return to England. Juliet, though, wasn't going to go to England with him. No, she was going to go back to South Africa.
We cannot keep anybody on the same continent in these families.
We really can't. And like, God, that physicist money must have been good, honey.
Yeah, they were rolling in the science bucks.
Yup. And so, of course, with the news that Juliet would be forced to leave New Zealand, Pauline and Juliet were devastated. They began to campaign that perhaps Pauline could move to South Africa with Juliet. However, both parents were like, no way, honey, that's not happening.
They're like, nope, too gay.
Yep, nope, too gay, next. So it's also worth noting, though, that in this time, the two girls were previously found out to be planning a trip together to America to have their novel that they were working on published. So they had actually tried to acquire funds to pay for these fares by selling stolen goods. And Pauline had actually tried to take money from her father's shop to pay for the trip. And it's also alleged that they talked about doing sex work as a means for providing for themselves once they moved to America.
Shit, they were pulling out all the stops.
Yeah. Exactly. So this was kind of becoming an unhealthy obsession at this point, and the fear of the embarrassment that would befall them if Juliet and Pauline were in fact more than just friends, the families desperately wanted to separate the two girls more than ever. So there was no way they were going to let them move to another continent together.
They're like, my God, think of it. If they move to America and become famous lesbians? No.
Right?
Ugh.
What an embarrassment.
Yeah, really, though. They're like, then everyone will know.
Exactly. So the two girls were just devastated, but they believed that Mrs. Parker, so Pauline's mom, was the one that was really getting in their way. So they agreed together that they had to get rid of her. And so with only 3 weeks until Juliet was set to leave for South Africa, 16-year-old Pauline and 15-year-old Juliet Hume decided that the best way to end Miss Parker's objection to their leaving together was to kill her in a way that it would appear to be an accident. And so the first thing that they did was start to play into their parents' expectations, and they no longer objected out loud to their parents' wishes. So they were basically like, yep, we understand. Juliet's moving away. It is what it is.
They're like, I'm straight. It's cool.
Exactly. But in secret, with Juliet as her accomplice, Pauline began to plot her own mother's murder and wrote it all down in a series of diary entries.
Oh, yeah, it's stupid but you don't write it down.
Right? There might have been some delusion of grandeur going on in their heads, but here are some of the diary entries. So June 20th, Pauline writes, Deborah and I, and Deborah being Juliet, Deborah and I talked for some time. Afterwards, we discussed our plans for moitering Mother and made them clear. But particularly enough, I have no qualms of conscience. Or is it peculiar? We are so mad. And she wrote moiter, M-O-I-D-E-R, because that was apparently the way they were reading it in crime fictions set in Brooklyn.
That's what you get for reading books.
Right? But I think it was also just kind of like an inside joke between them. And maybe she thought if she didn't actually write the word murder, it was not so clear what they were intending on doing.
Yeah, and I wrote Gina, thank you very much. Like,
right? Who's Deborah? I don't know her.
Yeah, Gina and Deborah are characters.
Yeah. So the next diary entry was dated June 21st, and it said, Deborah rang, and we decided to use a brick in a stocking rather than a sandbag. Mother has fallen in with plans beautifully. Feel quite keyed up. And then the next and last entry, June 22nd, I felt very excited last night and sort of night before Christmas, but I did not have pleasant dreams. I am about to rise. And at the top of this page that was dated June 22nd, it was headed the day of the happy event.
Two things. One, what the fuck? Two, she was going to put a brick in stockings and like swing it at her mother?
Yep.
You have a lot of faith in nylons, honey.
This is 1950 nylons, girl.
Girl, were those fucking Caprizio tights? Like, what are you doing? That is some drag queen shit.
Yes. She probably had 16 pair.
Yeah, what the fuck? Like, that's enough that if you break a bone, nothing comes out.
Right, just like Shangela.
Yeah, when she broke her leg performing, it kept everything in place because she was wearing 5 pairs of fucking compression tights.
Lesson learned, wear 5 pairs of tights to help keep your bones in place.
Yeah, and keeps your bricks in place when you're committing matricide. What the fuck?
Right? Okay, so here we are, June 22nd, 1954. Days before Juliet was set to depart for South Africa. Pauline had convinced her mother to take herself and Juliet to a nearby tea house in Victoria Park for a farewell outing. And Miss Parker agreed. And so earlier that day, the three of them rode a bus out of town for afternoon tea. The three sat and shared several cups of tea before deciding to head out along a walking trail around 3 p.m., and after which they would then catch the bus back into town. So they were going down the trail, and Juliet Hume hurried along in front. When she had rounded a bend in the track and was out of sight of the Parkers, Juliet reached into her pocket and scattered an array of distinct pink pebbles along the trail. So Pauline Parker was walking alongside her mother with a hand in her coat pocket, clutching half a brick which Juliet had brought from her home to the Parkers at noon that day. So Pauline had slipped the piece of brick into a foot of an old stocking, devising a murder weapon. So Juliet was 60 yards in front and still out of sight down the track when Honora Parker caught sight of the pink pebbles, and Pauline remarked how pretty it was, and when Honora bent down to pick up one of the pebbles, Pauline pulled out the brick from her pocket, clutched the loose hose in her hands, and swung. Honora was struck hard on the back of the head and collapsed. She tried to get back up, but Pauline continued to swing, hitting her over and over and over. Juliet ran back to Pauline and took the weapon from her and then proceeded to swing and hit Pauline's mother until she was no longer moving. Having suffered over 40 blows, Honora Mary Parker was dead.
Aww.
So the two girls, covered in blood, sprinted back up the pathway, yelling and sobbing. They returned to the tea house and found the proprietress, Miss Agnes Ritchie, and they were screaming that there had been an accident, that Miss Parker had fallen and hit her head. They explained that they tried to carry her up the hill, but she was just too heavy and that they could not go back down there. So while Miss Ritchie called her husband, the girls then decided to go inside to a sink to wash the blood off of themselves. And later, Miss Ritchie would report to the police that she had actually heard the girls laughing as they were in washing up at the sink. Meanwhile, her husband, Kenneth Nielsen Ritchie, ran down the track, and under a tall pine tree by the track, he found the body of Honora Parker. Ritchie hurried back to the kiosk and telephoned the police and the ambulance, and the police took the girls away, and the ambulance took the body away. Shortly after, Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume were charged with the murder of Honora Parker.
Yes, they were, because I bet they probably thought they were going to get away with it at first. They were like, cool, we'll go down, we'll answer some questions, we'll cry a little bit, it'll be fine. But nah, honey.
Nah, honey. You can probably die from falling down a pathway and hitting your head on a couple of stones, but you're not going to get 40 plus gashes in your face.
Bitch, have you seen the staircase?
But that was an owl. That was different.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I forgot an owl did it.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm speaking out of turn. How inappropriate.
So now we're at the trial. So when the trial had started to take place, it was a huge deal in Christchurch because this was just a little town. They've never seen anything like this. And the trial began in August 1954, just about 2 months after the incident. So Pauline's diaries, which outlined the murder plot, made their guilt pretty apparent. So there were also speculations that the two girls were lesbians. And with this, the lawyer decided, hey, maybe we can plead insanity.
Oh, fuck you for turning that on them like that.
Right? So Juliet and Pauline were basically abiding by their own moral code and remained firm in their beliefs, but in the interviews with many different doctors and many different psychiatrists, they were also very much aware and understood that what they had done was wrong. It was against the law, but it wasn't against their law. But with this rational thought process, the doctors and the psychiatrists were basically like, nah, like, these girls are pretty fucking smart. They're pretty with it. They're not insane.
Yeah, they're not insane. They're also very self-centered teenagers, obviously.
Clearly. And so the trial went on for just a few days. During the trial, neither girl confessed to being in a romantic relationship, although some of Pauline's diary entries heavily suggested that perhaps they were. And on August 28th, 1954, it took just over 2 hours to find Pauline Parker and Juliet Hume guilty of the murder of Honora Parker on June 22nd, 1954. However, because they were too young to be considered for the death penalty and were considered minors in the eyes of the court, Juliet Hume and Pauline Parker were each sentenced to serve just 5 years imprisonment and then were ordered to never speak to one another ever again. So 5 years later, in 1959, both girls were released from prison and assigned new legal names. Pauline remained under supervision for a period of time. She lived in Australia and then reportedly moved to the United Kingdom, where she reportedly lives to this day as a bookkeeper. After her release from prison, Juliet Hume was reunited with her father and spent some time in England and then the United States. And basically not much was known about either of them until around 1994 with the release of Peter Jackson's film Heavenly Creatures, starring Kate Winslet as Juliet Hume and Melanie Linsky as Pauline Parker. And so the release of this film, and if you've never seen the film, it's actually really, really worthwhile. It's pretty cool, and they really go into like these girls' like fantasy worlds and delusions, so it's a good watch. But basically the release of this film popularized the murder case more than ever, and it led to the discovery of Juliet Hume's assumed identity.
Was her name Gina?
Her name was not Gina. Her name was Anne. Well, her name is Anne Perry. And get this, she is a true crime fiction writer.
What?
She has written over 55 true crime novels and has sold over 25 million books world fucking wide.
Holy shit.
So there's like actually a 2019 documentary called Anne Perry Interiors, and there's like tons of interviews with her on the internet because after 1994, everybody was like, yo girl, what's up?
Yeah, exactly.
guess apparently she shows not a lot of like remorse, kind of like delusion around her part in the murder, basically being like, I didn't plot a murder. I was accomplice in somebody else's murder. So this is the way she's kind of like spun it to herself. But yeah, both of them are still alive today. Both of them have apparently never communicated with each other afterwards. But that is the Parker-Hulme murder.
Holy shit, that's insane.
Right? It's really wild. Like, those are some ballsy ass teenagers.
Yeah, and I can't stop thinking about those nylons. My God.
Right?
Well, thank you for bringing that, Tyler. That was cool.
No worries.
All right. Well, I guess we've come to that point in the show that we hit every week. Tyler, I'm going to ask you the question. What have you learned this week?
Now, maybe it's not something that I've learned, but maybe something that I've come to suspect. Is there like a step-by-step how-to for demons? Like, they always seem to do the similar things, like creeping outside the shower, knocking on the doors, appearing as little children when they're actually really, like, scary fucking demons. Just like, is there a demon academy? Why are they always doing the same things?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a demon code.
Right? I don't know. So I guess I haven't learned anything. I just have more questions.
Wow, that's really deep of you. Well, I think today my big lesson is something that I already kind of knew. I never want to have children.
Right.
I think that's fair. So on that note, thanks for joining us, everybody. 21 episodes in. We haven't fucked it up yet.
No, and we can legally drink in America now.
Oh my God. Stop personifying our podcast. So if you really enjoyed today's show and you're listening on Apple Podcasts or any other app that has a rating and review system, we would love it if you could leave us a rating and review. It really boosts the signal on apps like Apple Podcasts. Mm-hmm. So we would love you forever if you could write a review and leave a rating.
Yes, and like you for always. If you want to see some visual components to accompany this week's episode, you can find that on our Instagram. That's Spooky Pod. That's THATSSPOOKYPOD. And amongst the episode notes, you'll also find some memes, some fun content. So if you don't already, follow us on Instagram and see what we're doing.
Totally. And if you're a Twitter user, you can also follow us on there at That Spooky Pod, spelled just like it is on the Instagram. And if you're looking for more info, you can go to our website, thatspooky.com. You can read show notes, you can listen to episodes, you can look at photos, you can do everything you need to do.
Yeah, and then if you have any of your own spooky stories, or you want to say hello, you want to suggest a topic, anything like that, you can send us an email at thatsspookypod@gmail.com.
And that's spelled just like the Twitter and the Instagram. And if you want to be able to access mini episodes, bonus content, and a whole bunch of other really cool perks, you can become a monthly supporter on Patreon. That's patreon.com/thatsspooky.
Woo, these things keep getting longer and longer.
You're welcome. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. We love you so much. I swear to God, we cannot see the tracks in your hair. Your extensions are flawless.
And we're just really focused on those beautiful new earrings that you're wearing.
Hot. So kissy kisses.
And like always, if you're gonna be a bitch,
Be a spooky bitch.
Bye.
Bye.